These are the top 20 strongest characters in One Piece according to Japan. That part at the end there being very important, because recently there was a poll conducted amongst Japanese One Piece fans to select the 20 most powerful characters in the series and rank them all by all of the power it is that they have. And I think that this is fun because power scaling in the Western fanbase can be a bit cringy and pointless. So let's see how they tackle it in the fictional pirate motherland. Kicking off with the allegedly 20th most powerful character in One Piece, Kozuki Oden. Does he belong in the top 20? Absolutely. In fact, I'm a bit surprised that he ranks this low. In One Piece history, there are only two other people who have convincingly smacked Oden from the dominant quadrant into the submissive and breedable quadrant of life, and they would be Edward Newgate and Goldie Roger. Oden was a clear step below those two, but no one else was ever outside of his abilities, at least not in his time. And were it not for an old lady impersonating a young boy, Oden likely would have gone on to defeat Kaido. I mean, it is a bit up in the air, but Kozuki Oden was a member of Roger's crew, and in the great words of Jinbei, a man who would be crewmate of the future king of the pirates cannot afford to tremble in the presence of a mere emperor. And if I had to explain why Oden ranks so low, then I would say that the anime probably plays a bit of a role in this, because Oden's only other notable battle against a world figure was anime only when he took on Copacabana in an absolute flawless display of raw, engaging Toei animation action. Still, I think that Oden is a fair enough opener. Now, curiously, according to Japan, in 19th place is Rox D. Zebek. And Rox, he's a very tricky character because not only have we never seen him do anything, but we've also never actually seen him himself. To this day, he remains but a mysterious silhouette. However, there is one good method to figure Rox out, which is by second-hand power scaling, which is a term that I, man on the internet, just made up to describe taking someone's second-hand account rather than us using feats that we readers have seen displayed. And in this case, the second-hand account would be that of Kaido. In one of my favorite panels in the entire series, Kaido questions how high Luffy's ceiling will go, and quite handily for us, Kaido also mentally envisions the ceiling itself, which means that according to a drunk dragon, each of these 5 people are stronger than Kaido himself, or at least on a roughly equal level, which includes Kozuki Oden, by the way. But Rox D. Zebek, with his history, may be the single strongest person to have ever existed in the One Piece world. That's speculation, so we'll leave that alone. But he should definitely be around Kaido, and I would probably slot him above, which wouldn't be an issue, except we're only at 19th place, and some slight spoilers, Kaido isn't coming up anytime soon. Instead, we move to Fujitora, who was elected as the 18th most powersome person and the first Marine Admiral on this list. But first does not mean that he's considered to be the weakest Marine Admiral, because Green Bull didn't even make the top 20. I have no idea where he ended up, but according to Japan, he is the undisputed weakest admiral. Now with Fujitora, I think that his positioning, that's pretty fair. What I don't agree with is the positioning of many people above and below him. For example, in 17th place, we have Golden Lion Shiki. And this was the first big moment of my brain not comprehending things. Look, the kindest thing I can say for Shiki is that he did once fight both Garp and Sengoku at the same time, which destroyed half of Marineford. So maybe I'm underrating him quite a bit. Maybe I'm being poisoned by the Strong World film where he was beaten by pre-time skip Luffy. That didn't happen, but I'm still poisoned by it. But even then, my biggest problem with Shiki, and in fact any former Rox Pirates member, is that he's ranked higher than Rox himself. And you just don't see Kaido thinking of Shiki when he's putting together his cute little mental shrine to the strongest people in the world. So as a result, I just don't see a world where Shiki ranks above Rox or even Oden. But now celebrating his Sweet 16, we have my favorite Marine Admiral Kizaru, a man who we've gotten to see quite a lot more of in recent Egghead Island events, although that doesn't necessarily make ranking him easier. On paper, what Kizaru did was fight Gear 5th Luffy to a draw. They both ended up knocking each other into, well, a state of not being able to get upness. But there is also a question of how serious Kizaru was being, because fighting Luffy was more like a side quest that got out of hand. Kizaru's focus was mostly elsewhere, and with what we've seen, I feel like he should be at least on par with Luffy, if not one place above or maybe even below. Because, being real here, Kizaru pushed Luffy to a place that not even Kaido could get him to. And Kizaru did it much quicker as well. So I'm going to be very disappointed in Japan if I don't see the future Pirate King in 15th place. Which is gonna happen. We're gonna experience the disappointment because now we move to 15 and all we need to do is knock the pirate part off and what we're left with is a king. So I guess only half disappointed to be fair, but also king in 15th. I don't know, man, that feels very high. Remembering that at this point, Japan has declared that King is more powerful than 2 whole Marine Admirals, as well as Rox D. Zebek and even Kozuki Oden, the man who King's captain canonically ranks above of King himself. This might be another anime thing, honestly. I said before that the anime didn't do Oden any favors, but the anime did King so many favors. Because the finale of Zoro versus King was such a spectacle. They went so far off the rails with this finale that it arguably outdoes the finale of Luffy versus Kaido. And as beautiful as it was, it did something that the anime is now quite notorious for in the Wano era, which is portray characters as either much stronger or much weaker than they actually are. In King's case, much stronger. In the pursuit of creating mind-blowing entertainment and always one-upping itself, a lot of fights, especially towards the end of the Wano anime, sometimes become completely unrecognizable from what happens in the manga. So if I had to guess, I'd say that's where a lot of this King hype is coming from. That or just general illiteracy. But Japan has also concluded that the 14th strongest character in all of the One Piece is Sengoku. And look, I don't disagree with this. Sengoku is one of the extremely rare characters in the series who has an undefeated record. When it comes to fight battling, Sengoku doesn't have a single L to his name. Because if he did, then we'd be calling him Sengloku. But I'm afraid this man has nothing but dubs. He is simply Swengoku. And again, we can use some good old secondhand power scaling with him as well. When Roger was complaining to the Marines that they were too easy to defeat, he insisted that next time they at least bring Garp or Sengoku with them. So Roger considers Sengoku to be a worthy opponent. Someone equitable to Garp and therefore someone also approaching Roger himself. And we do know that Sengoku was at least strong enough to physically restrain Garp, which prevented the brutal punch murder of Sakazuki that one time. But you could also make the argument that Garp wasn't fully committed to freeing himself. He wasn't using his full Garp power. It was a complicated situation because he wanted to kill a dude because that dude killed another dude, but Garp also knew that dude killing was pretty bad in general and not at all befitting of a hero of the Marines. So I take this moment as more like Sengoku just keeping him on the right track. But the 13th strongest man in the series was also a Marine, and his name is Kuzan. And yeah, honestly, it's really hard not to buy into the Kuzan hype at the moment. As the self-professed practitioner of lazy justice, Kuzan has gone through most of One Piece as a pretty underrated presence. Underrated even after all of the insane stuff we've seen him do. The initial display of dominance against the Straw Hats, his performance at the Paramount War, and facing off against Sakazuki for 10 whole days. Even after all of that, as it turns out, we were still underestimating him. Because for better or worse, he's recently been revealed to be a physical beast on a similar level to that of the current admittedly aging Monkey D. Garp. So I don't think it's wrong for Kuzan to be here at all. In fact, knowing some of the higher ranked characters that are coming up, I think that 13th might be even a little bit too conservative for Kuzan. Because to me, he's the perfect combination of peak physical ability combined with a naturally insane devil fruit ability trained to a high degree. He also makes his own coffee, like he probably grows his own beans and everything. He calls it the Kuzan blend, which he then combines with a daily diet of milk and sherry. He's a very liquid-based person. But one thing's for sure, with Kuzan in 13th place and given how hard Sakazuki had to struggle over the course of 10 days to defeat him, then we're practically guaranteed to see Sakazuki next. But in 12th place we have, well, not him, because oh my, it's Ben Beckman, a man who is probably really strong and smart and stuff, but probably also doesn't belong here. Let's go through everything that Ben Beckman has shown us to date. He pointed a gun at Kizaru, and that was pretty cool, but a lot of people tend to forget what happens next, which is that Kizaru says lol JK and goes after Luffy anyway. Ben Beckman even says blast. He's still not done, as Ben Beckman stands there and proceeds to do nothing about it. Ben Beckman is also the one who severed the arm of Eustace Kid. And not to meme on Kid too much in this video, and it's fun to point out that he doesn't belong anywhere in this video. He's not top 20, silly kid. But when it comes to severing his arm, I don't consider that a huge achievement at this level. Remember that we're almost breaking the top 10 strongest characters of all time here, and at this level, beating up a kid just isn't that impressive. So you know what? I'm ready to be proven wrong about Ben Beckman, maybe. But right now, it's difficult to stand here and to try to comprehend that he was ranked above 3 Marine admirals. In fact, according to Japan, the only admiral who Ben Beckman isn't stronger than is our 11th place Sakazuki. So Sakazuki in the end is pretty close to Kuzan, and I'm definitely happy about that. I think that tracks. Wherever one of them is, the other shouldn't be too far behind or in front. But you know, when it comes to good old punch fighting, Sakazuki holds a very special distinction in the One Piece world, which is that almost all of his opponents choose to run from him instead of actually fight. There are, of course, a couple of exceptions. Kuzan, who got his leg blown off, Whitebeard, who got his face blown off, and Ace, who got his stomach blown right the F out. There's a reason why people run from Sakazuki. And even then, when they choose that option, they are still lucky to escape. One notable Sakazuki fleer was our current Emperor of the Sea, Blackbeard. Even with his entire entire crew, he still shat his britches purely at the thought of engaging Sakazuki. And that's probably for the best. I'd say Blackbeard has a pretty solid survival instinct. However, it very much goes underappreciated by Japan, because I'm going to put this out there right now. Blackbeard didn't even rank in the top 20, which I'm very surprised by given some of the people who did. I mean, I get it. On screen, Blackbeard has been fairly unimpressive, but with him, it's all about the implications. It's all about the stuff he does in the shadows. And he's not set up as the final antagonist for nothing, and booting him out of the conversation in favor of King, Shiki, and even some future contenders is just a little bit wild to me. Cracking the top 10 now, Japan has smiled upon Monkey D. Dragon, the 10th most powerful character in the series, maybe. It could be true. He could also be much higher, and it could also be much lower. But we have even less evidence to judge Dragon than we do Roxy Zebek. Because sure, we've seen more of Dragon's face, but even without a face, Rox has managed to accomplish more in this story than Dragon has. And really, the only thing that I can say with any certainty is that Dragon was stronger than pre-time skip Smoker, because if he wasn't, then Smoker would have smoked him, both metaphorically and perhaps very literally. That's just how desperate Smoker is for that sweet, sweet hit. The dude is clearly addicted and needs help. So realistically speaking about this fictional pirate comic, Dragon will almost certainly be a top 20 contender. But at this stage, it's a little bit bold to assume that he's this high up. Meanwhile, in 9th place, it's Hello Kaido. Remember him? I said that he wasn't going to appear for a while, but then some time passed and now here we are. Kaido is, or maybe even was, is the correct tense, the strongest creature in the world. Not because there's anyone out there who's stronger now, but because he may have left this world through a very magmasome gate. Kaido and 9, I don't know, it feels a bit low to me. I mean, I don't think he'd be in the top 5, but that's mostly because Kaido doesn't even include himself in his own top 5, and you know, I'm happy to take his word on that. The bigger issue is that we have yet to see Japan rank Big Mom. So does that mean that they think she's stronger than Kaido? And the answer to that is absolutely not. In fact, just like Blackbeard, Big Mom didn't even make the top 20. Just let that sink in for a bit. Ben Beckman, Golden Lion, Shiki, and King are all allegedly more powerful than Big Mom. This is probably the biggest travesty of this list, because at least from my perspective, Big Mom and Kaido are completely equal in terms of raw strength. Generally, I'd give Kaido an edge for intelligence, but I don't know, because he also does a lot of dumb stuff as well. I just think it's so weird that you can hold one so highly and yet so readily discredit the other. But even then, I think that this next place will shock you a bit more. Ranking in 8th position is Roronoa Zoro. Now, I love Zoro. I even have a life-size statue of Zoro. He's right over there where you can't see. But this 8, the 8th strongest character in all of the One Piece, it's too high. To Zoro's credit, there was the potential to wound, perhaps even fatally wound Kaido at one point during the rooftop fight where Big Mom had to warn Kaido about the sword and then the Kaido had to dodge, otherwise he would have been hit by the sword. I don't know though, we didn't get to see the outcome of that, but Zoro did eventually go on to scar Kaido. Look, he's a very strong boy. But in the end, he's not stronger than Kaido. And arguably, neither is 7th place Monkey D. Luffy, because his defeat of Kaido is quite controversial, and I would have loved to have seen what happened if Kaido simply decided to dodge Luffy's punch instead of tanking it. In my personal opinion, Kaido beat Kaido, but Luffy does have the technical dub, and throughout the fight, it was becoming pretty clear that Kaido didn't have a good solution to deal with Gear 5th, so as soon as Nika appeared, he hit an insurmountable rubbery wall. And from there, it really becomes more about what'll happen first. Kaido gets beaten by a big old punch that he decides to take, or Luffy runs out of energy, and it turns out it was the former. So I'm pretty okay with Luffy being here. It's just the journey we took to get to him that I find questionable. Jumping forward though, in 6th place we find Luffy's mentor, Silver's Rayleigh. And this is where I question exactly, well, what the question was. Because if we're talking about a young, youthful, vibrant Rayleigh, then maybe. But with modern Rayleigh, I think he's gotten a bit too old for this level. He even admits in chapter 1059 that he could not have won in a straight up fight against Blackbeard. And look, if Rayleigh can't even beat someone who's not on the list, then he himself shouldn't even be here, let alone anywhere near this high. I do think it's about time for Rayleigh to retire and give up his list-making days. You know, settle down in a nice pirate-infested slum with a casino nearby to gamble away all of his money, and then a slave house across the road to sell himself to get out of debt. You know, that nice, peaceful, retired life that we all dream of. But then again, we should never underestimate the elderly, and Japan certainly hasn't, with the 5th most powerful character in the series being voted as Monkey D. Garp. And again, I do need to ask for some clarification here in terms of which Garp it is we're talking about, because Prime Roger chasing Garp definitely belongs here, but I would think that modern Garp probably doesn't quite break the top 10 anymore. He's still amazing, but he's almost 80, and the world is moving on. Moving on to 4th place, that is where Japan has elected Mihawk. And this is perfect, no notes. Currently, there are only 2 people who have ever given Mihawk a challenge, one of them being Shanks, who ranks in 3rd place, and the other being Whitebeard, who ranks in 2nd place, who Mihawk himself admitted there was quite a gaping chasm of power between them. And of course, in 1st place, Japan has selected Goldie Roger, and I think that makes perfect sense as well. You could maybe argue about Shanks being in 3rd because maybe Mihawk's stronger than him, but we don't know that. Other than him though, who's coming close to Shanks? Not Blackbeard, that's for sure. He's not even on the list at all, and he certainly doesn't deserve to be. All he did was wound number 3, kill number 2, recruit number 13, and have number 6 flat out admit that he could not win against him. But no, Japan, you're right, and I'm sure that Blackbeard won't be an issue at all going forward. And that's the top 20 most powerful characters in One Piece according to Japan, and if you in any way disagree with this list, then feel free to protest by hitting the subscribe button and your objection will be registered. But only if you're not already subscribed. If you're already subscribed, then do not that.